Hey, what's up? This is the first episode of the new direction that I've taken for What's Up Conversations. I'm going to do more podcasts and I'm aiming to involve the listeners more in each episode. How's that, you might ask? Well, just follow me at Twitter at hrnikufar, which is spelled HRNIKOOFAR. And each week, hopefully, I'll tell you who I'm gonna talk to next week, and you can ask your questions in Twitter and I'll forward them to the person I'm interviewing. The show is on Spotify, Castbox, Stitcher, and YouTube. Please like, subscribe, and share the podcast. It really helps. And since I'm not making any money off of this, it's sort of a passion project, and your support undoubtedly helps me to stay motivated and to continue doing this. Anyways, this episode is a very special episode. I had Jehanne Rousseau, the CEO at Spiders and the lead writer of Greedfall. I've been playing Greedfall recently, and in my opinion, this is one of the best RPGs of the year. Great story, exciting action gameplay, and one of my favorite elements of the game, different approaches toward completing a quest. So, Greedfall is kind of an old school RPG like Dragon Age and The Witcher, but with many new touches to make it different and exciting. This episode is going to surprise you. Jehanne Rousseau is definitely a kind of person you want to look up to get motivated. You think you work hard? Listen to this podcast to figure out about her life, how Spiders came to be, and how Greedfall was made with only 50 people in 3 years. Yeah. Hey, by the way, the sound quality of Jehanne is not very good at the beginning, but it's get better as you go through the conversation. So, excuse me for that. Let's get into it. Thank you very much for doing this podcast. I know you've been busy dealing with the release of Greedfall, and it must be an overwhelming time for you and your team. First of all, congratulations for this amazing RPG and ruining my life because I can't stop playing it.
Thank you. Thank you a lot, because it's of course a lot of work, passion, and it's been an emotional release for us, because we're maybe a bit afraid or something, when you're releasing a game, because you don't know how the public will react and how players will like the game. So far it's good. I mean, most of the players like the game, so we are happy with that.
Yeah. So. Consider me as one. So, what do you do after releasing such a huge game? I'm not talking about the work. I'm talking about you as the leader of this project in the studio. Are you happy that the game is finally out and it's getting positive reactions, or are you sad that the project is finished and out of your touch? And of course, this is not your first game, but I imagine this is the biggest one Spiders have ever put out in the market yet. So
it's our biggest game. Yes.
So how's life right now?
I've took a week of holidays. It was good for that.
Well deserved.
And but to be honest, the day just before the release, I wasn't even able to sleep because I was so afraid of, afraid and excited in some ways. And now that everything is released, we are working on some patch, of course, to help completely get rid of the different bugs that the players encountered. And now we also work on the next game. So it's still the very beginning. So it's strange because you have to to try to forget the previous projects, and we're still in the middle of it in some ways. But you have to try to think into the next thing. So it's a strange period, but. It's also very exciting and very motivating because we received a lot of amazing message from our players. So we really want to continue developing great games and to improve our process and the stories we are creating and so on. So it's kind of mix of different feelings, but we're mostly very happy about what happened and about the coming games. So, of course, I can't say much about it because it's the very beginning, and we won't begin the communication around these new projects before some month. But it's already part of our work today. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, great. You talked about working on a new game. Isn't it soon to work on the next project right after the last one just got released?
Well, we really don't have the choice. In fact, we're still a small studio, so of course it's a pre-production for now. So we're mostly working on the story, on design on the characters and creatures and universe and so on. We are not completely into the development for now, but we will have to go soon into it because we can't spend much time, resting on the previous game. And as we have changed our publisher, we until now we worked with Focus Home Interactive, and now we've been bought by Big Ben, so it's another French publisher. And of course, they're waiting for us to work and to create games for them. So we don't have much choice, and we have to move to the next creation. But honestly, I think even if it's a bit difficult because in some ways we have to. How could I say that in English? Sorry, I'm struggling to. Well, we still have some ideas and feelings from the previous games that we have to take part of. But in some ways, it's also a good way to use all the energy coming from the release and all the good feelings and motivation coming from all these players' message, and use them to into our creation. I think that using these positive things is a good way to find back our energy and motivation to create. So even if it can be difficult some days, honestly, I spend still half of the day fixing things and answering people and so on. But as a small studio, there is no other choice than move on and try to find new ideas and listening to some players' complaints to avoid doing some mistakes next time. So it's also a way to do a kind of post-mortem of the game, of course, to take this time to analyze all the feedbacks and use them for the creation of the next game.
Yeah, that's good news for the fans, because that means they're going to get the new game from Spiders pretty soon.
Well, it still takes time to develop, that?
Yeah, but you're going to pre-production pretty soon, so that's good.
Yeah.
So let's go back and talk about your past. I'm always interested to know about the life's journey of the people I admire, because it's inspirational. It reminds you that these people are just people like everyone else, but their passion and their love towards what they do make them different. So tell me about growing up becoming a game developer.
Well, I think that's the first time I had the ability to play at home. I was 4 or 5 or something. My parents offered me a ColecoVision. It was no console, and my first game was Donkey Kong back then. And it was really an old machine. I'm not sure that you can't still find it on the market because it was nearly 40 years ago. So and I was playing these games over and over. I think that when I was still very young, I discovered a game that was called Pitfall. And it was amazing compared to the other games because there were not only 1 or 3 levels, there were plenty of them, and it was really beginning to look like a story, not just this platformers, very simple platformers. So I think this was the beginning of my passion. And I had a friend who had an NES, and I went to her place to play Zelda, and it was also something amazing. And well, I grew up, really playing games a lot. Well, not only playing games, I was also reading a lot and watching a lot of movies and so on. But back then there were no studies to get into the game development. So I did some studies in Latin and Greek. I know that it makes not much sense with what I'm doing today. And also some studies in classical art.
Uh-huh.
And well, I was interested by what I was learning, but I didn't want to be a teacher, and it was nearly the only thing I could do with this type of studies. So I quit after 3 years or something. And I was really asking myself what I would do with all that. And some friends I was playing with on tabletop RPGs. We were talking a lot about what we would become. We were all students, and they told me, "But why are you not trying to work into video games? Because you like to write, you like to draw, and you like video games, so
Oh.
it could make sense." And say, okay, but I'm no one. How could I reach this type of of job? It was really for me impossible, to work into that industry.
Yeah.
And through a friend, I heard of a very young company that was looking for a 2D artist. So as I was doing a lot of pixel art on my computer, I say, okay, I will try to apply. Why not? And they took me. So they took me, and I was their first employee. So
So how
this
old were you at this time?
22.
Oh, 22. Yeah.
So it
What
was
was the name of the company
21
actually?
years ago. It was called RFX. It was a company doing games on Game Boy first, then Game Boy Color, then Game Boy Advanced, and well, we tried to do some game on other platforms, but it was just at the moment of the 2000 crisis, so the company had to shut down.
Oh.
But yeah, I stayed there for some years, and I developed several games on on this old platform. So it was it was my first step into the video game industry.
Yeah.
And
So.
well, when the company shut down, I moved to Gameloft.
Oh, okay.
I moved to Game. It was the very beginning of Gameloft back then. There were, I think that they switched and then their name from Ludiwap, which was completely, unknown, to Gameloft some few days before I entered the company. And we created different games on phone, but it's a very old phone, the black and white ones. And I worked on many games there. In 1 year and a half, I probably worked on 30 different games.
Oh.
And what was very interesting that it was going so fast. The technology was changing so fast that we had to change and improve our games very quickly. And I did, this first game on these black and white phones, and then some better phones came with, colors, and then some PDA, and then some.
Yeah, I
Uh,
remember those black and white games from Gameloft. Ha,
yeah, so, yeah,
maybe I played those as a kid.
it's possible. Honestly, it's
Yeah.
possible because I've really done a lot of them.
Yeah.
And I was more of a producer there. I was not working
So
on
how
the
old
pixel
how
art.
old were you now?
I'm 43.
No, no, no.
So,
Back in those days when you
oh,
joined the
sorry.
Gameloft, yeah.
I was, I don't know, 27 or something.
Oh, yeah. At
27.
27, so at 27, you were the producer of the games.
Yeah. I already did produce some game at RFX. When you are a very small team, most of the time you're obliged to play several
Yeah,
roles.
yeah,
So
exactly.
even if I was still doing some pixel art, I was also leading some teams. And when I
Wow.
joined Loft, they were looking for for some people that were able to understand game design constraints, art constraints, and also to to manage some teams that were developing the games in several countries, because Gameloft has some studio in China, in Romania, and also in Canada. So I had to work with these different people. It was very interesting because, I had to have some very, some very hard horaries, because I had to be very early in the morning for the China teams and
Yeah.
very late in the evening for the Canadian
Oh.
teams. But it was really interesting to talk with people with such different cultures and backgrounds and stories. So it was a great experience. but it was also very tiring, to be honest.
Yeah.
And after 1 year and a half there, my daughter was, growing, and I wanted to spend with her a little more time. And I was a little tired also with the way the company was handled, because it was very hard in some ways with the salaries. I think that it changed now, but employees back there was not that. How could I say that? It was a little like working in a fabric or something. It was the teams that were mostly in Romania and China. They were not that considered by the direction, and I felt a little bad for them, and I didn't like to work that way with them. So, it was another reason why I left back then. I know that it has changed a lot since its moment, because some employees, were so upset by that they switched politics. But I moved for several reasons, and I worked for 2 years nearly as a journalist, mostly in pen and papers RPGs. I also worked as an illustrator, so I did illustration for some small card games, board games, and also RPGs. And after 2 years, I went back to the video games, and because I just found the perfect job, so I saw that a company called Monte Cristo was looking for a producer, project manager, to create an RPG for them. And they want someone who would create a whole universe and a story and so on. So it was for me, exactly the dream job. So I contacted them. I did several interviews and so on. And they took me in. And it was there that I met a part of the team that is still in Spiders today.
Oh.
And we created a game that was called Silverfall. And we created also with Isadon, which was a real. It was not some few items. It was a real story, and the add-on was you could play it as a standalone. So it was really like a second game in some ways.
Yeah.
And when the company Monte Cristo decided to switch their genre and to work on several other types of games, they wanted to do mostly some city builders. It's not that I don't like city builders, but we had such an amazing team working on RPGs that we didn't want to switch to these games. So we decided to create a company, and this is how Spiders was created 11 years ago. So
specifically to make RPGs.
yeah, we really created for that, and because we are fans of that type of games, and also because we want to continue working together. So.
Yeah. So where does the name Spiders come from?
Well, it's a mix of different things. At the beginning, we were looking for a name that would transmit craftsman, idea. Because we didn't want to, to be, too big or something. We want, to insist on the fact that we were passionate people working with our craft, and this, we were, looking about workshop and all this, names, but all of them were taken. So after a while, say, okay, let's try to find an idea that is related to craftsmanship, but that is a little different. And so we were thinking into waving, and dream waivers and so on were already taken too. And the best, creature in the nature that is a good waiver is a spider. And it was immediately very fun ideas to us, because we have already created the universe for the game Mars. And I'm also a fan of David Bowie. And the Spiders from Mars was the name of his first band. So it completely makes sense to us, and that's why we are called the Spiders.
Yeah, Spiders is kind of RPG-ish name too. So
yeah. It's also making sense with the type of universe we wanted to develop.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I think as we go, the video game industry is getting more diverse regarding the genders and the process of making video games. And honestly, many of my favorite people in the industry are women. I believe successful people like you take away the false excuses any young girl anywhere could come up with. So let's talk about it. When you were growing up, have you ever had a problem with the fact that this business, at least years ago, was very male dominant?
Well, not really. When I began, it was really not a problem because I think that the question was not even, said. It was they were looking for some artist. I was a 2D artist, and that was it. Later on, I had some. I think that it was when I was during one of the interviews at Monte Cristo or something, one of the guys in front of me asked me, "But you know you're a girl?" I said, "Yeah, I figured that some years ago," and but that was it, and they never spoke about that.
And you never
Anymore.
asked about it, like, okay, what's up with that? I'm a girl.
Yeah, so I think that they wanted to be sure that it was not a problem to me, but to work into that environment that was of course very male dominant, but it was not. So well, I was already working the video games for years, so I didn't care. And but honestly, I had some, of course, bad experience with some people here and there, but it was mostly when I began to lead and become the CEO of Spiders. Of course, not with my team or with most of the developers. The worst experience with some, people from the press or with some people from publishers who tried, to get some, because of course I was looking for some contracts for my company, and they tried to trade favors for contracts, and it was something that was very shocking to me to realize that these people were that stupid. But well, we never worked with them anyway, so so in the end it was not that bad. And I think I have a terrible temper, so it's most of the time I avoid a lot of problems because of that. But yeah, I hope that these people now, they are old, they will probably leave the industry after a while. So and I think that the younger people are not that obsessed with that type of problems, or and now that we are talking about these type of things, I think that, and I hope that the industry will get safer and friendlier to anyone. So and we try at least to do that in Spiders.
Yeah, that is great. So let's talk about Greedfall. While playing Greedfall, I was amazed by the amount of storytelling and dialogues you've inserted into it. How many people were involved writing this, and overall, how do you even start to approach such a huge game in storytelling? Tell me about the process.
To be honest, I was a bit overwhelmed after a while, but at the beginning, we created the universe with the core team of at Spiders, Camille Allemand, who is the director of all the cutscenes. He was very involved into some aspect of the creation of the universe. Cyril Tamasebi, which is the art director, and also, of course, Sébastien Diroussa, who is the lead game designer. So we were working all together, trying to create a universe. We wanted something, different from the usual fantasy setting, and we also wanted to create something different from Technomancer, because I love this universe and so on, but it was, a little difficult to spend that much time on a desertical planet. So being able to have some green environments with some amazing natural point of view was part of what we wanted for the next game. So this is partly the beginning of the discussion on Greedfall. And then we wanted to insist on the exploration, and it's plenty of ideas coming from plenty of people on the team. And the idea of creating a setting in the 17th century was very appealing to us. For different reasons. For Cyril, our director, it was because he really liked the costumes of this period. He also likes the type of paintings, mostly Flemish paintings of this time period. So for him, it was a good inspiration. For Camille, it was because the fact that we could use firearms could be very interesting into the cutscenes. So it's a mix of different, feelings from different people of the team. But well, that's how the idea of Greedfall came. And then it's been a lot of work to create a consistent universe. That's when also we decided to create a language for the natives. We worked with a linguist to create it. That was brought by a good friend of me, which is also the English writer. Because when I'm writing in French. Obviously, my English is not good enough. So we were working together into the adaptation and writing of.
Oh, you
of
translated the script into English?
It's not really a translation. It's kind of really adaptation. We were working really together. I was writing in French, and he was adapting in English. So the translation is not a literal translation.
Oh, yeah.
It's always an adaptation. And some ideas also came from discussion we had together. So his name is Kurt Macklang. He worked on many different games, well, that's how we create the characters and places and so on, and the basis of the main scenario. But then I had to create all the scenarios because, if you play the game, you've seen that there are plenty of different stories, not only one. So I spent some time creating the background and stories for all the characters and trying to make them, all linked and connected to the main scenario to have a really consistent feeling. And it was a lot of writing, to be honest. I spent months writing the dialogues in French, and then they were adapted. I spent also I spent 3 months helping the recording studio with English actors and with our voice director to adapt all the thing. And we still did some fix at that moment because when you write, it's different when you say it. So when the actors were saying some sentences, they were saying, this one is not feeling good, we should change it. So we were changing it while we were recording it. So it was an amazing experience, but it took us a lot of time. There are really a lot of words in the game. I know that there are 250,000 words of dialogues. So it's a lot of them, and also there is a codex and and I don't know even the amount of words in the codex and UX and other words that are inside the game. So it's been a lot of work.
So every dialogue, every cutscene, it really it really makes me frustrated just to think about how much work went into it. Every dialogue, you can have a different companion with you, and they contribute to the conversation, and you can have a further discussion with them. And this is crazy how many companion you have in the game, and how do you keep up being sane writing in this amount of dialogues?
I think I went a little insane after a while. I was nearly speaking with the companions as if they were in the room around me. So I was working very late some days, and from time to time.
And you have to switch brain to think about, okay, what this character would say here,
exactly.
What this character would, what would our reaction with.
I really have to put myself into the shoes of the character and to imagine how they would react, what they would, think about the situation, and so on. We have some grid tools that we have created internally to allow the handling, easier handling of all these situations. So I can visualize the different characters that can be, present during a dialogue. I also have a good look on all the different embranchments into the story and dialogues, but it's still a lot of work. And yeah, it was honestly from time to time a little crazy. And I think that it was still at the beginning of the years. I had a lot of dialogues to fix and to change and to adapt. And I was for 3 months. I worked every day, 13 hours a day, with no weekend. And
Wow.
at the end of that, I was so tired that I was from time to time falling asleep on my keyboard. So it's been a lot of work.
So that brings this question: that how do you handle your personal life than your work life? I mean, how's the family reacting to this amount of work you're?
Well, I have the luck to be able to work at home most of the time, so at least I can see them. Well, it would be more accurate to say that they see me, and I'm working. But yeah, my daughter is now is a grown up, so I don't have. Well, she can be a little independent now. She's 19, so well, she will be 19 in 2 days. So
Congratulations.
she's studying, and so she's not at home most of the time because she's studying in Paris, and I'm not living in Paris anymore. So, well, I was seeing her mostly during the weekend, but yeah, it's a little, difficult for the family around.
Yeah.
But and to be honest, during the development, it was earlier in the development, I had some very difficult moment because my mother was sick. And it was also terrible because it makes some kind of a connection with what is happening during the game. And
Yeah, I
for me,
can imagine. The beginning of the Greedfall actually
yeah,
starts with the main character's mother being sick. Yeah.
and it was happening to me at the same time. So I was. Well, it was really a difficult moment during the development. I think I did probably put a lot of emotion into that different scenes because it was what I was living at that moment. But well, my mother passed away. It was
Oh, I'm sorry.
well, well, it happens, and it was for me a very difficult moment. But being able to work as much was in some ways a way to escape. This. I would say what was happening to me and my family, and most of my family is living far from me. So, of course, we are, talking nearly every day. But my sister is living in the US. My brother is living in the south of France. So it was. I was a lot, confronted to being alone in front of my computer. So I think I put a lot of my energy and into the game, in fact, into the creation of this game. So it was a way to escape all this dire, thinking. And well, I don't want to be over emotional. I try now to take a step back from it, but I think it was something that was at a moment during the development important into the way I was looking at the game and the energy I was able to feel into that development. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. Sometimes the work itself really helps because I've lost my father 2 weeks ago, and yeah, it's okay. And I kind of seek refuge in making music. And funny that a week after that, I start to make music for a Hello Kitty game. So it was completely opposite of what was going on inside of my head. But working on something that you love really helps to
Exactly.
recollect yourself, especially after tragedy. So, and the beginning of the Greedfall, really, it's a very impactful, especially in that first cutscene when he says goodbye to his mother. So, my character was male, so I say he. So,
Yeah. It's okay.
yeah. So, yeah, I can see that how you wrote that. So, as I said, I'm a video game composer, and I have to say, Olivier Dervier is constantly outdoing himself every year. His score and his method of implementing music in Greedfall is truly inspiring. How did you get to know him, and how was the process of making music for Greedfall?
Well, we met him years ago. Sylvain Prunier, our sound designer, and he's the audio lead at Spiders. He knew him since Obscure, which was a game they developed. I don't
Yeah, I
know,
know.
but it was a long time ago, and they began friends back then. So when we looked for a composer for of Oxen Man, so it was our second big games. Our second games, it was not that big, but compared to
Yeah.
Grateful. But and Olivier joined our team to create the music for Fox and Men. And since that time, I think that the only game we did without him was Mars Warlocks, because it was a very small budget and we were not able to pay him because he's an amazing composer and it's normal
Yeah.
to give him a nice amount of money. So, but all our other games were developed with him, and it's always very inspirational to work with him because he has always some amazing ideas. He always tried to be very involved into the creation of the universe, into the gameplay itself, also to have a reacting music to the gameplay and situations inside the
He's
game.
really genius in that department.
Yeah, I agree. and it's very nice because I've not worked with as much as different musicians, but it's the only one that took that much time. It's for each project to sit with us, development team, and to ask us what is the game, what it is about, what type of gameplay is involved, what will be the first discoveries of the players, how they will enjoy the game, and so on. And by having these discussions, he spend also some time looking at the artworks and really being involved into the development team and not just sending away some music from an external position. It really helps, I think, to create something that is deeply connected to what is happening inside the game. So it's always an amazing experience, and I hope we will still continue working with him.
Yeah, I hope that too. So, Greedfall, I guess, was your last collaboration with Focus Home Interactive. I love their
Yeah.
games. They're always tend to publish different and sort of unusual games. How was saying goodbye to them, and how was saying hello to Big Ben?
Well, of course, we're happy that our last, collaboration is a success, and that we have, this kind of good feedbacks from the community and players and press also on Gridfall. So I think that they're happy that, the last experience is positive. All our past games were, met a break-even and brought back some money to them. So they were obviously happy to work with Spiders, but when we decided to Spiders was created, as I told you, 11 years ago, and each of the shareholders were developers. We had no investors, and for 11 years we managed, to keep the company that way. But as the company is growing bigger and bigger, and it was, it was difficult to handle that on the financial aspect. I had also some, difficulty to sleep from time to time because I had to pay everyone and to find a way to do so. And mostly when we were between two different projects, it was not easy to feel secure of what was happening on the financial aspect. So we decided with the different shareholders that are still, most of them are still in the company. We decided to sell the company to publishers that could support us on that aspect. And to be honest, I'm not that good into going into the bankers, asking them money. I did that because I had to, but it's really not what I like into the video game industry. So I was also relieved to be able to find someone that would completely handle all these financial situations.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Writing this amount of dialogues for Greedfall and managing the team and making sure everyone is paid, the bankroll. Wow, sister,
Yeah, it
you are
was.
amazing.
But
So I
yeah,
hope it works out well. Yeah.
well, I really hope too. And that we decided to look for someone to buy the company. And Focus was interested, but they had also some shareholders, and some of them were not very convinced that buying some development studio would make sense to them. So they did a proposition, but it was really far from what we were waiting. So we passed, and Big Ben proposed us some very interesting deal where we would still be interested into the success of our coming games and so on. So and not only us but the team also, and it was something that was very important to me. So well, they seems very interested by our project, interested by the team, by what we wanted to create, and also by the fact that we want to be very inclusive into with the team compared to some some success that could happen in the future. So this all these different elements convinced us that they were the good company to work with. And also because Cyanide, which is another French developers that has been bought by Big Ben some months before us, they were also, well, we are in contact, they are friends, and they told us that everything was very fine with Big Ben. So we said, okay, so other developers had good experience, so it makes sense to accept. And well, it's very for now it's very beginning of our collaboration, but everything seems fine, and they are very welcoming with us. And of course, obviously, they're very happy with the success of Greedfall. So, well, as far as I can say for now, everything seems fine. And I hope that Focus will, continue developing great games. I'm sure that they will, because I know some studios they're working with, and yeah, they will probably have some good surprise in the coming.
Yeah. So this transition means we won't see any Greedfall sequel, right?
Well, not as Greedfall, but we may be able to use the universe again. I don't know, honestly. We would need a lawyer to, to be sure of that.
A lawyer can answer that.
But maybe if we write a sequel and don't call it Greedfall or a prequel, whatever. But it could be possible if we are not using exactly the same characters, or if we are just using the setting, it may be possible. But don't worry, we still have plenty of ideas to create amazing games. I love the universe of Greedfall, and to be honest, I would be frustrated if I won't be able to come back to it. But well, for now, it's still it's probably will need some negotiations or reflections at least.
You can change the name to Greed Rise and you're good to go.
For example, yeah.
That's not Greedfall, this is Greed Rise. Yeah. So as usual, I ask people on Twitter and Instagram to pass their questions to me, and I'm going to read some of them, and hopefully they will have their answers from you. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. Let's start with an indie game developer girl, Mahnoz_JPS from Instagram. She's asked, in making games, you're constantly planning, but not always things go right as planned. What's the reason behind this, and how do you manage your team to get it right?
Wow, it's a good question, but when you're always at the beginning, you have to do some plannings for budgets, for timelines and so on, and we're always trying to stick to it. But while we are creating the games, we also discover that things are changing. Some good ideas on the paper may not be that good into the game. So when we test it and play test it with some players that come at the studio, we from time to time realize that things are not as good as we want them to. So we have to change them, and this was not always planned into our schedule. So we of course have to switch and change and make some amends and try to transform the mistakes into some success. We really used a lot testers, internal and also external testers. some feedback from the QA. Focus on the publisher is also doing a lot of QA, so it will help us also to have some interesting feedbacks about everything: graphics, story, game design, gameplay, and so on. And by using all these feedbacks during all the development, we try to improve things. And of course, when we know we have to change something, we then have to discuss with the publisher and ask them if we can have more time, or if we can, find a way to develop it. So from time to time, we need to remove things completely, because we know that we won't be able to let them into the game without having to let the quality go. So we have to make a lot of difficult choices. But honestly, we have also a project manager in the company, and we're of course working very close together to really follow the development, all the development timelines and the different difficulties that the developers can encounter during the development. And we really try each week to do some, not always a real reunion, but just to talk about, okay, is everything fine? Is everyone in the team is okay with what he had to handle? And each time there is a kind of alarm signal ringing, saying, okay, there is a problem here that we will have to handle, and we have to find solution. We know that we have this amount of budget and this amount of time, and the idea is really to find the right solution to get over this problem. It can be to recruit some people. We can be to outsource some data or assets, for example. We had to do that, for example, into Greedfall. We find a very good company that was doing some outsourcing for the assets, and because we weren't able to do everything internally. So for each problem there is probably one solution. And it's the idea is to react quickly and not spend too much time, saying, "Oh my God, I can see the problem coming, but I won't do anything." And you have to, act now and try to find some solution. And there is also a lot of negotiation, obviously, with the publisher. Try to convince him that, okay, he already, invests that amount of money, but with 3 months more, it would be, amazing, and it would be better because. You list the different problem you have met. Say, okay, we have that. We need to improve that, and help us. And they did. So that's also why we took more time than we were supposed to. The game development was not supposed to last 3 years, but it did. And also it cost a little more than it was planned originally. But in the end, I think that they are happy because we were right to do these changes. The game is good in the end, and some changes came from them. They also find some issues in there and ask us to modify or to improve different mechanisms. So it was a collaborative work on that part.
Yeah. So she's also asked, in your career, you probably had failures and hopelessness not to pursue what you love. What were your decisions during those times?
Well, as I told you before, I quit for 2 years the video game industry. It was I was not that far because I was working in RPG, but it was more pen and paper than video games. But it's complicated because the passion was still there. I was still, completely in love with video games and still in love with the amazing amount of possibilities that this media is bringing us, and as creators, but also as players, because I'm still playing a lot. And I was, I think, maybe a little disappointed by the industry and by some bad experience than by the video game itself. And that's why I went back. It's when I realized that it was just some people or maybe one company and not the whole creation of video game that was involved. well, I went back and I was, right to do that because I met some amazing people I'm still working with. I create plenty of different games. I completely, I'm very proud of them. Even if some are, they're not flawless, but they are, in some ways they are still part of my story. They are interesting. And they were the first steps that helped us reach Greedfall today. So I think that if you had a bad experience, analyze first where this bad experience is coming from. Is it from the company? Is it from, because one company can be very good for some people and very bad to others, because each company nearly in the video game industry has its own philosophy. And well, for example, I'm not good into very big companies. I don't like that. I feel one in a million, and I want to, I don't like to be just a small cogs into the big mechanism. I want to really participate into the creation of games. So when I had the occasion to work into some very big company, after a while I felt lost. But some other people do love to work in big companies because it means more money, because it means bigger teams and so on. So it really depends on yourself and not a general advice. But if you feel bad into one company, well, maybe you should just switch and find another one. There are plenty of them. If you are you feel maybe too restrained by a small company, try the big ones, or the opposite if it's another feeling. But I think that most of the time when you are disappointed by the industry, it comes from several people, or a very specific experience, in fact, and not by the media itself.
Oh yeah. So, by the way, how many people are you at Spiders?
30. During the development of
30?
Yeah.
How many people worked on Greedfall?
50.
I'm out of here. Come on. For how many years?
3 years.
3 years. That is insane.
Yeah, a lot of work. But I think that our previous projects helped us a lot because we had our own tools. We had also some gameplay elements that were already implemented. For example, inventory. We also had an inventory on our previous games. We also had some crafting systems. So we just had to improve it, but we don't have to create it again from nothing. So I think it helps us to create this type of games that are enormous, but we can create it a little faster and with a little less people, because we always try to use what we can from our previous developments.
Yeah. So from Twitter, at the Burnt Firefly has asked, "Are you going to keep making RPGs forever?"
I don't know. As long as I feel, as I'm feeling excited or entertained by this type of games, I will. There are still plenty of stories to be said. I think that RPGs can still be improved in many ways, on the gameplay, on the stories, on the ways that, the freedom given to the players. So we'll still try to improve the recipe as long as the team is okay with that. And it's my favorite types of games. So it's difficult for me to switch. From time to time, I would say I'd like to maybe do another
Battle
type of
Royale
games.
game.
But in the end, I really enjoy writing these stories. So I don't know. For now, yes, we will continue developing RPGs. And as long as the perfect RPG is not out, maybe it will. I mean, maybe CD Projekt will release a completely perfect RPG. So maybe then we will stop and say, okay, there is nothing left to be said or to be written. But for now, I think I can still bring something. And I also know that RPG players, they love to discover, plenty of different universe, even if they had, for example, adore a game like The Witcher 3. It's not. It will not stop them from playing another type of game in another universe, because, well, they want to experiment and try some other stories. So, well, I think that as long as it is the case, I will maybe have my ability to continue creating these type of games.
Yeah, I hope you don't change gear because you really have something to say in RPGs. I mean, there are companies out there making RPGs and they're making good RPGs, but they're not adding anything to the genre. But Greedfall, it has some special things, really.
Thank you.
So, from Twitter again, at Amir Borghi has asked about a tweet of yours that you have posted after the release of Greedfall, in which you've mentioned about the hard work of you and the Spiders team during the production of Greedfall. He has asked
Yeah.
to talk about that.
Well, I think that I did a tweet the day of the release that was a bit probably a bit emotional, and because, as I told you, the night before the release, I didn't sleep at all. I was so I don't know exactly how to define this feeling, because it was really a mix of excitation, of fear also.
Were you anticipating this amount of success for Greedfall?
No, no, not really. It's very difficult when you're developing a game because you're inside it, and you're inside the characters, inside the stories, inside also the bugs, and that you have to fix and so on. So it's difficult, to take a step from it and say, okay, is it a good game? And we had some feedbacks of the testers, of course, but we are still very, I would say, worried about the release. So and we also had a few bad, feedback from the press, and even if most of the feedbacks are good, one bad one can be,
Yeah.
terrible enough, because it's so personal in some ways. All these characters and the story itself are kind of my family. For 3 years,
Yeah.
I've lived with them, and it's kind of, releasing or sending your baby into the world. So it's there is a kind of baby blues after the end of after the release of the game, and this kind of strange feeling when you're mixed feeling, and I think that I was still under this emotion when I posted this thing on Twitter. Don't worry, I'm better now. And each time I receive bad feedback from the press, it's always difficult, but I'm not, angry or anything. I feel sad in some ways, because I feel that maybe it's because I did not I didn't do the things good enough in some ways, or I wasn't good enough in my job. But after a while, I try to use that as something positive and say, okay, I still have to improve myself and to improve our next games, and let's do that. So even if it's the first or two first days of the release, I feel terrible. Then I just go back to work, and it's okay.
Yeah. No, seriously, Greedfall is a Greedfall is a success. Okay, because first time I saw the first trailer of the game, it was back when it was announced for the first time. I saw a glimpse of an idea of the game, and I was like, I'm going to play this game, so I'm not going to watch any trailer or anything about it anymore. So I knew from that moment that I wanted to play this game. So when it came out, I got the game, and I started to play, and I love RPG games, and I'm a very busy man. I'm constantly in my studio working, and I have very minimum amount of time when I get home to play video games. So, and this is the season of video games. I mean,
Yeah.
Gears of War, Borderlands, I don't know, a lot of games out there. And I go back, and I can't just stay there. I play this game on PCs. I boot up the PC and I just play, and I love this game,
Thank you.
and I love the amount of time I'm giving the game, because again, there are some elements in this game, which are very, very unique for me, who I love RPG games, and I have a lot of friends who play RPGs too, and we gather around and talk about games, and we were all impressed by Greedfall, how smart it plays, how innovative it is towards some elements that make RPGs great. So this is really, really a great game. So I hope you sleep very well tonight.
It
So
means a lot to us, really to have this type of, of feedbacks. And as I told you, it's really emotional to create and to write all these characters stories, and yeah, to have this type of feedback from our players, I think it's the best thing that can happen to any developers, and it really helps to find the motivation to continue the creation and to imagine some new thing and new situations. And so thank you, really, it means a lot.
yeah. So all right, that's it. I want to thank you so much for doing this podcast, and I have to tell you that your career, personality, and games are truly inspiring for me. I mean, after this interview, and I thought I was doing so much work recently. After this, I'm like, oh yeah, man, you gotta step it up. You're
Oh,
lazy.
no,
So,
no, it's I'm overworking probably, but in my team I really try to avoid this amount of work for all of them, because after a while you feel so tired that part of your creativity is um, is in some ways bugged by your fatigue, and um, by all this parasitic ideas that can come from all the problems of the development. So um, don't worry, stay involved into your creation, put your heart into it, and I think that is the most important thing of all. As long as there is passion, and there is love for video games and for what we are creating, I think that everything is fine. And I was at a festival this weekend, an indie festival. I was part of the jury. I've seen plenty of different indie games, and I was amazed really by the creativity, by the and it's there are of course small teams developing some very interesting game, and each time I'm doing that, it's also very motivating, because I say, okay,
uh,
this media is incredible. The game developers, as you know, at the wall are incredibles, and I'm so proud to be part of it, to be part of this community, to be part of this creation. And I think that we are all very lucky to be there, and as long as we keep that feeling, everything should be fine.
yeah, really, because Greedfall shows that love and passion of making great RPG is not always entangled with money and huge production. This game hits everything it aims perfectly, in my opinion, and I'm enjoying getting lost in its world. So, thank you
Thank
so much for the game. Thank you so much for the podcast, and I can't wait to see uh, what spiders come up next in this new era of spiders, I guess.
Thank you a lot,
Yeah.
and well, thank you for this podcast. It was very interesting for me, and also thank you to all the people who listened to it
Yeah.
for for the questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Have a great day.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah. Goodbye.